Snoop Dogg and D.I.
Hello and welcome to Villanova Tip Time, the Villanova men's basketball pregame show. I'm your host, Chris Notaro, and I want to welcome you to this regular season finale of the pregame show here at the end of our fourth season. Of course, we don't know what the cards hold as far as Big East tournament seeding and a possible NCAA tournament bid, but we can say that this is the last episode of the regular season of this season. And I'm really happy to be here and thankful that I get to do this and that it's become what it's become. So really happy to have you along for the ride here as we've got about 15 minutes until a huge game for Villanova with their last chance to punch an NCAA tournament ticket, short of the conference tournament next week, of course, in the world's most famous arena in New York, New York. Villanova welcomes in nationally 10th ranked Creighton to the Wells Fargo Center today. We're going to talk about Villanova's games this week. The big implication on March hopes, of course, continuing that talk about the bubble and the conference tournament right around the corner. We'll reintroduce this Creighton team who's been playing really good ball as of late and find themselves, of course, as a top 10 team here in the month of March, which is no easy feat. And we'll get you on your way for tip-off at 2:30 on the Fox Mothership. We are here, of course, presented by Homefield Apparel as part of the Nova Insider Network. Shout out promo code Nova Insider to get you some goodies off there. Get those orders in this weekend so you've got your fresh gear for the Big East tournament and for the hopefully, knock on wood, fingers crossed, take care of business today and get into the NCAA tournament and let us have a much nicer March. I was actually just talking to my wife about this right before, just like an hour or two ago. I remember last season, right? Like March Madness is like one of my favorite times of the year. As just a college basketball fan, as a sports fan, beyond just being a Villanova fan, definitely felt like there was a little bit of, call it missing magic last year as our team wasn't in it. So I think for all of us, anybody that's supporting Villanova, rooting hard not only for the team to get into the NCAA tournament, because I think that's just good for the program, but also selfishly for ourselves, because there's that extra magic that it brings to have your team in the dance and the extra magic that it's missing if your team's not there. So, of course, today, number 10 team coming in at home, Villanova sort of squarely on the bubble around the first four in, last four in, depending on what bracketologist you subscribe to. Winning against the number 10 team today would put them likely in the NCAA tournament. We'll talk about Big East seeding possibilities and what that means for the kind of extended resume beyond today. But today is essentially the second win and in game that Nova has in a row, because earlier this week, as you all saw, they kind of laid an offensive dud in North Jersey, losing to Seton Hall in the first of, again, back-to-back essential play-in games. The Villanova defense has improved all year, and this game was no exception. The game plan felt like it was executed very well by the Cats, and they just didn't or couldn't hit shots. Stop me if you've heard that before. But I feel like especially in the first half and heading into halftime, the talk before the game, from me included, in all the pregame predictions and previews, was Seton Hall can't beat you from three. And Nova's game plan was definitely to give them those shots, and Seton Hall converted. I think they scored a season-high number of three-pointers, which, stinks. But the game plan was what it was, and especially in the first half, I think they made 5 threes in the first half. Like 4 of them were well-contested, like not great shots that just kind of went in. So at the end of the day, you can't control that. You can control your effort and your execution. And I feel like the defense and the defensive game plan was very sound. In the end, Seton Hall only scored 66 points on their home court. However, the offensive end for Nova was pretty abysmal. You got to give credit to Seton Hall, who was also playing excellent defense, but this was one of those games where Villanova's offense just looked unprepared for the moment. With the coach's emphasis on defense and rebounding, that's all you hear from Coach Neptune in press conference after press conference after press conference. And it seems like he literally doesn't care about offense. I think that stings a little extra for most Nova fans when the team just completely loses itself once it crosses half court, which it did for most of this game. Now, it is interesting to point out that for the first 4 to 5 minutes of this game against Seton Hall, Villanova looked like the offense that Hurricane threw Atlantis. I noticed a tweet out there. I think it was Chris Lane said something like, "Where has this team been? Is this like, we found this team? I think we're going to have a fun couple of weeks." But that was only for the first 5 minutes of the game. If you extend that to the first quarter of the game, Villanova had about 19 points in the first quarter, the first 25% of this game, and they were only able to score 37 points in the final 30 minutes of this game, which is just really, really ugly basketball to watch. And I'm sure very, very frustrating for these players on top of that. The bright spot in this one, I think, was TJ Bamba looking a little bit better after having struggled with the face mask, with the broken bone in the face in the game prior. So a bright spot to have him back. And I think this team just needs to keep doing what they're doing on defense. No complaints there. But they need to flush that offensive tape from Tuesday. I feel like we've said that so many times this year. They need to flush the tape. They need to flush the tape. They need to flush the tape. So it's definitely an ugly trend, an ugly pattern. But they really do need to flush that tape and get ready to play some no-fear basketball today with potentially the season on the line with, call them offensive, sometimes juggernaut in Creighton coming in. You're going to have to hit shots to win this game today. You're not going to be able to win it on defense alone. So when we take a step back and we look at what this all means for the NCAA tournament picture, like I've already said a couple times today, win today and you're in for the most part, right? Unless disaster strikes in by way of a loss to Georgetown or DePaul next week in Madison Square Garden, you win today and you're in. And even with that disaster, you might still be in. You lose today and your hopes are going to rely solely on Madison Square Garden. And maybe you don't need to win the whole thing, but maybe you do. You certainly are going to need to beat at least one or two good teams to really sway the committee to put you in the field because they just don't know what to make of you. So Villanova's had two control your own destiny opportunities this week, unable to convert in the first because of bad offense. Can they convert in the second today? I think they can because they've already beaten Creighton once this year. So let's talk about Big East tournament seeding for a second. With a win today, Villanova most likely is going to end up as a 6 seed, maybe a 5 seed, but no worse than a 6. So let's talk about that. If you end up as a 6 seed, your DePaul is already locked into the 11 seed. So if you end up as a 6 seed, you're going to play DePaul on Wednesday night, and then you're going to have the late slot on Thursday night against either well, I guess it would potentially be a rematch with Creighton at that point because if Creighton's currently tied for second, so if they lost today, they would fall to that third spot. You'd likely have Creighton, maybe an outside shot with a tiebreaker if Marquette lost to Xavier today, that Marquette could still be in that 3 spot against Nova. I don't know. In any case, you're going to have DePaul on Wednesday. You would have most likely Creighton on Thursday, who you'd have to beat for a second time in 5 days, which no easy feat. I think the 5 seed proposition isn't much better because, in fact, you may even want the 6 seed, to be honest, because then at least you're notching that extra win against DePaul. And like we talked about earlier this week, you're bolstering your win-loss kind of eye test there, which is somewhere that Nova is struggling, I think, more so than the resume and the metrics itself. So the 5 seed means you're not playing on Wednesday. Great, you got the bye, but you're playing in the 4-5 game in the second game of the early slate on Thursday, and you're probably playing that against Seton Hall, who you just sort of were embarrassed by last week up the road in Newark. So a lot to think about there with a win. With a loss, they have an outside shot at that 6 seed. They're most likely going to be a 7 seed, which means they would play Georgetown on Wednesday night. And it is also possible that they could fall down to the 8 line, which means they're playing Butler in the 8-9 game, which, they've lost to Butler this season. So that's not a layup. So that means you would lose today. You're certainly out of the at-large tournament field. I think with a loss today, you would need to beat Butler on Wednesday. And even with that win, you probably need another one. And that lines you up to play most likely UConn on Thursday in the first game of the early slate at the Big East tournament, which I think I can speak for all of us when I say that slot totally sucks. And I say that from experience of having seen Nova play in that slot often as the 1 seed and underperform. It's tough to get off the bus playing on at noon on a Thursday compared to when the lights get bright in prime time at Madison Square Garden. So a lot of moving pieces. I hope you followed me on that journey. It's looking like even with a win or a loss, 6, again, maybe a 7, possibly fall to an 8. Outside chance you can get as high as a 5, but I think we want to end up in that 6-7 line. I think we want to end up in that 6 line. more than anything. So before we get into Creighton, let's talk a little bit about some Nova players. Following up on what we talked about earlier this week, we talked about what it means for Justin Moore to have his legs back under him. But then, of course, he had a rough offensive game against Seton Hall, sort of struggling, especially with the efficiency. I think he was like 1 for 9 or 2 for 9 or something like that. More so than not having his legs under him. Again, I think Seton Hall played really good defense in this game. I think it's not automatic that Justin Moore is just going to be sort of a robot and have a great game every game. So less so than not having his legs under him. I think maybe he just had a struggle of a game. And he, as one of the senior leaders of this program, he's been through so much at Villanova. You have to think that for Justin Moore and Eric Dixon, the moment is no bigger than today. And they know as the quote unquote senior leaders of this team that the team they can will this team into the tournament with a victory today. And I like Justin Moore. I like Justin Moore in that spot. I like Justin Moore's sort of traditional fire and hungriness. And I like that to come out in a game like today, especially bouncing back from a letdown offensive performance earlier this week and sort of being able to kind of hashtag attitude, flush that. As a student of Jay Wright, nobody on this team is more suited than Justin Moore to have a bounce back game from a game earlier in this week that may be disappointing. I think I also talked about Brendan Housen sort of coming into his own as an elite shooter for this team. And then Seton Hall put the handcuffs on him on Tuesday, forcing a 1 for 6 performance. You better believe he's going to be hungry coming in today, showing up to a likely 3-point battle with Creighton, where there have been some historic 3-point battles with Creighton on this very floor. You have to figure that's going to get a guy like Housen jacked up to compete. So with that, let's talk a little bit about Creighton as we've got a couple minutes left here. So Coach Greg McDermott's fresh off a major contract extension just signed within the last couple days, putting rumors of a high-profile departure to bed. He's bringing this team in at 28 overall, 13-6 in the Big East, which is good for a current tie for second with Marquette for Big East seeding, as I mentioned earlier. And like I said also earlier, Marquette has Xavier today. So if you're looking at the top of the Big East seeding line, those are the sort of storylines to look at. And Greg McDermott's got his team coming into this game at number 10 in the country, having won 6 of their last 7, including wins against then number 1 UConn and then number 5 Marquette over this 6 of 7 run. This Creighton team, as you all probably well know, is known as an elite 3-point shooting team. They're currently converting at a team clip of 36.5%, which is actually down a little bit. That was 38% the last time we played them almost 3 months ago now, so it's been forever. And Creighton shoots a ton of threes. So generally speaking, they shoot a lot of threes. They do it well. They spread the ball around. They play solid defense, and they don't turn the ball over. What does that mean? Villanova offense cannot no-show today. I can't stress that enough. Villanova can play excellent defense today. If they are not able to score 70 points, they are not going to win this game. Creighton's offense is a bit top-heavy, we'll say, but it is elite at the top. You've got Baylor Shireman leading the way points-wise. He's averaging 18.5 points a game, 8.9 rebounds a game, and 4 assists a game. That's a monster box score average for Baylor Shireman. Trey Alexander's averaging 17.5 points, almost 6 boards, and 5 assists a game. And Ryan Kalkbrenner is averaging 17 points and 7 boards a game. That is a monster big 3 for Creighton. Also have to note, transfer Stephen Ashworth has been coming on very strong in the second half of the season, playing a much more elevated on this role than when the last time Villanova saw Creighton. Ashworth is averaging 10 points, 3 boards, and 4 assists a game, and he's currently on a run of 7 straight games scoring in double figures. So you've got 4 guys here, 3 of whom are in all Big East first team conversation. You have to figure Shireman's probably going to make first team. Trey Alexander and Kalkbrenner are probably looking more like second team. And you got, and of course, as I mentioned, you got Stephen Ashworth there coming on strong. So you've got a team that can beat you in a lot of ways. So as we come down to the final 2 minutes, let's talk about the keys to the game. Number 1, no ghosts. No ghosts of former Creighton performances on this floor, of a strong 3-point shooting Creighton team with a lot of options from behind the arc. A lot of ghosts, a lot of demons of past Creighton teams that have come in and had success at the Wells Fargo Center. So we ain't afraid of no ghosts today. There will be no ghosts today. Next, we're going to say there's no zombies today. This is not a Halloween episode, but we're going to say there should be no zombies today. And by zombies, I mean the Villanova offense. You just can't lay an egg on offense today. It's as simple as that. This Jekyll and Hyde Nova offense that we've seen all year, I don't know whether it's Jekyll or Hyde. I forget which one's the good one. Well, we need to see the good one. If there's a zombie, you're not going to win this game. You're just not. And lastly, potential. Time for potential is all over for Villanova. It's time to put up or shut up. Again, you've got a second straight win and in opportunity. If you can't convert one of these, you probably don't deserve to be there at large anyway. That's just stating the facts. So while I'm super pumped about this team and this team's ceiling and this team's ability to make a little noise when they play well, I also know that this team's floor is pretty low and they have to play up to the ceiling today to earn the spot. It's as simple as that. So I'm not exactly sure when I'm going to see you next. I think it depends on the Big East schedule when it comes out. Obviously, if we get an NCAA tournament bid. So while I very much hope that you're going to see me again for a Villanova Tip Time special postseason episode, Big East tournament, NCAA tournament, or all of the above, I don't exactly know when that's going to be. But when I do, you'll be the first to hear it. We'll publish a schedule when we know the schedule, right? So for right now, I want you to grab a beverage, get ready to bring the energy, bring the attitude like you haven't at any point this season, because it really doesn't get bigger than today as far as a regular season game. Time to grab your favorite viewing spot on the couch. Ladies and gentlemen, for the final time this regular season, it's tip time.